I need to show you something that happened Tuesday, March 24th, 2026, that nobody's talking about. Russia just quietly escalated its military relationship with Iran in a way that could redraw the entire balance of power in the Middle East. Not behind closed doors, not buried in some classified briefing, but through a series of coordinated transfers, signals, and confirmations that officials are now struggling to downplay. And here's the part that should concern you. Reports are now confirming that advanced drone systems, some derived from battlefield-tested designs used in Ukraine, are being shared between Moscow and Tehran at a scale we haven't seen before. Not symbolic, not experimental, operational, the kind of capability that changes how wars are fought overnight. Think about that for a moment. You have Russia, a nuclear power locked in a prolonged conflict with the West, deepening military cooperation with Iran, a country already entangled with Israel, Gulf states, and U.S. forces across multiple theaters. That's not just a regional story anymore. That's a global flashpoint forming in real time. Officials are now saying this could dramatically increase Iran's strike range, targeting precision and swarm drone capability, tools that have already reshaped battlefields from Kyiv to the Red Sea. And what you're about to hear changes everything about how close we might actually be to a broader multi-front conflict, because this isn't just about weapons. It's about alliances hardening, red lines blurring, and a world order that looks increasingly unstable by the day. Before we dive deeper, make sure you've hit the notification bell so you don't miss updates on how this story develops. This situation is evolving fast. Here's what happened. Let me take you back to Monday, March 23rd, 2026. In Moscow, Sergei Shoigu, Russia's defense minister, made a statement that, at first glance, sounded routine. But according to multiple defense briefings, those remarks sent shockwaves through Washington, Tel Aviv, and Brussels within hours. Shoigu stood before a closed-door security forum and delivered what officials described as a measured update on Russia's international defense cooperation. But I'm quoting directly here. He said, "Russia will continue expanding its military technical partnerships with strategic allies facing external pressure." 23 words that, according to intelligence sources, were anything but vague. Because within 12 hours, reports are now confirming that Iranian military officials had already arrived in Kazan, Russia, to oversee what appears to be the next phase of drone systems integration. Here's what happened next. Satellite imagery flagged unusual cargo movements, and U.S. intelligence picked up encrypted communications between Russian defense contractors and Iran's Revolutionary Guard. And then came the confirmation. According to officials familiar with the matter, Russia began transferring upgraded drone components, likely linked to the Garan 2 platform, along with targeting software enhancements. Not just hardware, software. That's a game changer. The immediate impact? Israeli defense officials reportedly went into emergency consultations. The Pentagon increased surveillance flights over the Persian Gulf, and European allies started quietly reassessing their exposure to a widening conflict zone. But here's what this actually means. This isn't just Russia helping Iran. This is a strategic alignment forming under pressure, where two heavily sanctioned states are now accelerating military innovation together, and that signals something much bigger than a simple weapons transfer. If you're finding this as significant as I am, hit the like button. It helps this critical analysis reach more people who need to understand what's really happening. Now, what I'm about to show you changes everything you thought you knew about how global military alliances actually function, especially in the Middle East. Because for decades, the formula was simple. For nearly 40 years, the system operated on predictable lines. America leads, allies follow. Washington sets the tone, and partners from NATO to the Gulf align accordingly. Russia disrupts, but mostly through proxies and plausible deniability. Iran resists, but stays regionally contained, relying on militias instead of direct escalation. That's how the system worked. Everyone assumed the structure was stable enough to prevent direct alignment between major powers and regional flashpoints. The idea was simple. Russia wouldn't fully commit to Iran militarily because it risked triggering a broader confrontation with the United States. Iran, in turn, would avoid becoming too dependent on a single global power, maintaining strategic ambiguity. But here's what nobody's talking about. This Russia-Iran drone cooperation just shattered that formula in one move. Because this isn't proxy warfare anymore. This is direct military integration. Sources are now confirming that joint production facilities, shared targeting intelligence, and synchronized deployment strategies are all being discussed, openly, not covertly. That's a completely different level of coordination. And it breaks one of the core assumptions that kept the region from spiraling into a larger war, that major powers would keep a certain distance from volatile regional conflicts. What's different now is speed and scale. The latest information shows that this partnership isn't evolving over years, it's accelerating in months. And when that happens, the margin for miscalculation shrinks dramatically. So the real question becomes, are we watching a temporary alignment or the early stages of a new geopolitical axis? Here's what I want to know from you in the comments. Do you think this changes the power dynamic permanently, or is this just a temporary shift? Let me know your thoughts below. Here's where it gets complicated. On the surface, this looks like a straightforward military transaction. Russia, under heavy sanctions and stretched by the Ukraine war, is simply deepening ties with Iran in exchange for logistical support and regional leverage. That's the narrative most headlines are sticking to, a transactional relationship, weapons for influence. But here's the thing nobody's talking about. Sources are now confirming this isn't just about selling drones or transferring parts. This is about co-developing next-generation warfare capabilities. Documents reveal that Russian and Iranian engineers have been working together since at least late November 2025 on adapting drone systems for multi-theater deployment, meaning the same platforms could be used in Eastern Europe, the Levant, and even maritime zones like the Red Sea. And wait, it gets worse. Reports are coming in that these systems are being designed with modular payloads, allowing rapid switching between surveillance, strike, and electronic warfare functions. That's not standard export behavior. That's integrated design planning. Why does that matter? Because it means Iran isn't just receiving weapons. It's gaining the capacity to replicate and evolve them independently. Officials are now saying this could significantly reduce Tehran's reliance on external suppliers within 12 to 18 months. Think about that shift. A country already involved in multiple proxy conflicts suddenly gains scalable, adaptable drone production, backed by Russian battlefield experience. That changes deterrence calculations across the region, especially for Israel and U.S. forces operating nearby, and more importantly, it suggests this partnership is long-term, not temporary. If you want to stay ahead of these developments that mainstream media isn't covering, subscribe to the channel. We break down these complex stories every week. But that's not even the real story. Now, what I'm about to show you changes the whole picture, because this isn't just about Russia helping Iran build better drones. It's about timing, coordination, and a much deeper strategic alignment that's unfolding in parallel across multiple regions. The latest information shows that between January 12th and March 18th, 2026, at least 3 separate delegations of Iranian defense officials traveled to Russia, 2 to Moscow, 1 to a military-industrial site near Yelabuga, where drone assembly lines are reportedly being expanded. Among them was Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, commander of Iran's aerospace force, a key figure in Tehran's missile and drone programs. And here's where the connections start to emerge. Less than 10 days after the March 18th visit, reports are now confirming a spike in coordinated drone activity across multiple flashpoints, including increased surveillance flights near the Golan Heights and suspected Iranian-linked operations in the Red Sea corridor. That timing isn't random. According to officials familiar with the intelligence, Russian defense contractors, some previously sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury in 2024, are now directly involved in upgrading Iran's targeting systems using combat data collected from Ukraine. That's battlefield feedback being looped into Middle Eastern operations. Think about what that enables. You're looking at a system where lessons learned from one war are immediately applied to another, compressing years of military evolution into months. That's not just cooperation, that's synchronization. And when 2 sanctioned powers begin aligning at that level, it creates a feedback loop that's incredibly difficult to disrupt through traditional diplomatic or economic pressure. If you think more people need to understand this, hit the like button and share this video. This kind of analysis doesn't get covered anywhere else. Now let's break down what's actually happening under the hood, because the technical side of this is where the real story unfolds. According to leaked defense briefings and procurement language, Russia and Iran are engaging in what's described as integrated unmanned aerial systems development with adaptive targeting frameworks and decentralized command architecture. That's the official phrasing. It sounds complex. It is complex. But let me translate that. In plain English, they're building drone systems that don't just follow pre-programmed routes. They learn, adapt, and coordinate with each other in real time. That's industry speak for semi-autonomous swarm warfare. Instead of one drone hitting one target, you're talking about dozens, sometimes hundreds, communicating mid-flight, adjusting to defenses, and overwhelming targets through sheer coordination. That's not theoretical anymore. Sources are now confirming that these systems include upgraded guidance packages, combining satellite navigation with terrain mapping and optical recognition. Translation: even if GPS is jammed, these drones can still find their targets using visual data. That's a major leap. Here's why that matters. Traditional air defense systems, like those used by Israel or US forces, are designed to intercept limited predictable threats. But when you introduce swarm logic and adaptive targeting, you're forcing those defenses to deal with saturation, too many targets, too little time. Think about what that means in practice. A single coordinated strike could involve 50 to 100 drones approaching from multiple directions, each adjusting its path based on real-time feedback. That's not just a military upgrade, that's a shift in how deterrence works entirely, and it explains why officials are now saying this cooperation is one of the most significant developments in modern asymmetric warfare. What's your take on this approach? Does it seem like smart strategy or overreach? Drop your opinion in the comments. I read them all. And then this happened. The response was immediate, and it wasn't subtle. Within hours of these reports surfacing on March 25, 2026, multiple governments began signaling that this wasn't just another regional development. It was something bigger. First, Lloyd Austin, U.S. Secretary of Defense, addressed reporters at the Pentagon. Officials are now saying he described the Russia-Iran drone cooperation as a destabilizing escalation that risks widening existing conflicts. He didn't stop there. According to transcripts, Austin confirmed increased U.S. aerial surveillance over the Persian Gulf and hinted at additional defensive deployments already underway. Then came Israel. Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister, reportedly convened an emergency security meeting in Tel Aviv. Reports are coming in that Israeli intelligence had already been tracking elements of this cooperation, but the scale, particularly the software integration, triggered immediate concern. Gallant stated, "We are prepared to act wherever necessary to neutralize emerging threats." That's not routine language, that's a signal. Germany wasn't far behind. Boris Pistorius, Germany's defense minister, issued a statement from Berlin calling for an urgent NATO consultation. Sources confirmed that at least 12 NATO member states requested classified briefings within 24 hours. That kind of coordinated response doesn't happen unless there's real concern behind the scenes. And it didn't stop there. Officials at the United Nations are now saying that an emergency session was quietly discussed, with at least 3 Security Council members pushing for formal review of arms transfer violations. Meanwhile, Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, reportedly increased air defense readiness levels. What does that scale of response signal? It tells you this isn't being treated as a bilateral issue. This is being viewed as a multi-theater risk with global implications. The international response to this is still developing. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you get updates as more countries react. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Because while these governments were issuing stern warnings in late March 2026, there's a staggering contrast between what was promised and what was actually happening on the ground. Think about that for a moment. Less than 24 hours earlier, on March 24th, U.S. officials had publicly stated that any significant transfer of advanced drone technology to Iran would trigger immediate sanctions and operational consequences. That was meant to signal deterrence. Less than a week later, reports are coming in that not only had the transfers continued, but Iran had begun test flights of the upgraded systems near Bandar Abbas, with Russia providing real-time technical guidance. Less than a month earlier, Israel had announced joint exercises with the U.S. in the eastern Mediterranean, ostensibly to maintain regional security. Yet while those drills were happening, Tehran was quietly integrating combat-proven drone tactics derived from the Ukraine conflict. The irony was thick enough to cut: speeches promising containment, joint statements about deterrence, and yet, in practice, the opposite was unfolding. That's not what it claims, that's what it actually is: a glaring gap between public rhetoric and operational reality. And here's the kicker: this isn't just a minor misalignment, it highlights a deeper trend where geopolitical signaling has become performative, while real strategic shifts occur quietly in ways that only intelligence agencies and a few insiders can track in real time. If this contradiction concerns you as much as it concerns me, show your support by hitting the like button. Let's make sure this gets the attention it deserves. Let me explain exactly why this matters practically, because here's what we're seeing. When Russia equips Iran with advanced drones, it doesn't just shift battlefield dynamics, it changes global economic and strategic calculations. The money that was supposed to flow through traditional arms markets, defense contractors, and allied procurement channels now risks diversion. According to defense economists, the combined value of the transferred drones and associated technology is estimated at $1.2 billion, with additional software and logistics support worth another $430 million. That's a sizable investment redirecting influence away from traditional Western-aligned networks. Strategically, the advantage is clear. Iran now gains not only improved strike capacity, but a platform for independent production and technological iteration. Reports are coming in that this could reduce Iranian reliance on foreign suppliers by as much as 60% within 18 months, giving Tehran leverage in regional negotiations and military posturing. At the same time, Russia strengthens its position as a key influencer in Middle Eastern security, gaining political capital with countries wary of U.S. dominance. Think about what that means in practice. If conflict flares anywhere from the Persian Gulf to southern Syria, Iran can deploy drones rapidly, backed by combat-tested software from Russia. That shifts deterrence calculations for Israel, Saudi Arabia, and even the U.S., which may now need to consider preemptive countermeasures instead of reactive responses. What this means strategically is that power dynamics in the Middle East are no longer just regional. They're directly connected to Moscow's global calculations. Allies gain flexibility, adversaries face new vulnerabilities, and every negotiation now occurs under a much higher risk scenario. This kind of strategic analysis takes hours of research. If you value this depth of coverage, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to understand how global power really works. So where does this actually go? Because here's the thing, speeches are easy, declarations are easy. Actually building an integrated battle-ready drone network between Russia and Iran, that's hard, really hard, because multiple challenges are already apparent. Can they actually deliver on the technical side? Sources are now confirming that Iran's existing manufacturing infrastructure can't yet support the full-scale production of advanced drones. Even with Russian guidance, ramping up assembly lines, integrating software, and ensuring quality control takes months, if not years. Political hurdles are equally complex. Elections, leadership changes, and internal factional disputes in Tehran could slow cooperation. Reports show that hardline and pragmatic elements within the Iranian military sometimes clash over prioritizing regional versus domestic security needs. That friction could delay deployment timelines. Coalition building is another obstacle. While Russia and Iran are aligned here, neighboring powers, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, are not. They're actively recalibrating their security partnerships, meaning any escalation could provoke broader countermeasures. That's an operational challenge that cannot be ignored. Finally, timing remains critical. Analysts are watching whether Moscow can maintain focus on this project while still being entangled in Eastern European theaters. Less than optimal timing risks exposure, missteps, or international pushback. Sources are now confirming that both countries are aware of these difficulties and are attempting to mitigate them. But the question remains, will it be enough? Can they actually build a functional, synchronized drone network before regional tensions escalate? That's the real test. What do you predict? Will this succeed, or is it doomed to fail? Give me your prediction in the comments and tell me why you think that. Here's where this goes from here. The next several months will be critical in determining whether this Russia-Iran drone partnership solidifies or falters under pressure. Analysts are now watching key checkpoints closely. Here's what I'm watching for. April 15th, 2026. Will Iran conduct its first publicly acknowledged test of the upgraded swarm drones? Reports indicate this could signal operational readiness. May 3, 2026, NATO intelligence briefings are expected to reveal whether European allies detect any significant movement or integration of Russian systems into Iranian facilities. Late June 2026, do we see any targeted responses from Israel or Gulf states, either through preemptive drills, sanctions, or localized strikes? If Iran demonstrates operational readiness and Russia continues providing technical support, this axis could rapidly accelerate, shifting regional deterrence and forcing global powers to reconsider their strategies. If, on the other hand, technical, political, or logistical obstacles cause delays, this effort could lose momentum and remain a strategic experiment rather than an immediate threat. The stakes are high. This isn't just about regional tensions, it's about a potential recalibration of power between Russia, Iran, the United States, and its allies. Every move in the coming months could influence whether this becomes a permanent shift or a temporary alignment. These next few months are critical. Hit the like button if you want to see follow-up coverage and make sure notifications are on so you don't miss the analysis when these checkpoints arrive. Here's what kept me up last night. We might be watching the early stages of something historians will look back on and say, that was the moment. The moment when a new military axis began forming quietly, yet with potentially global ramifications. That's the story. From an old state where Iran relied on limited proxy tools and regional influence, to a new state where it can deploy semi-autonomous drones backed by Russian technology and battlefield experience. This is a dramatic shift. The implications stretch from Tehran to Moscow, Jerusalem to Washington, and beyond. Historically, moments like these have marked turning points in global power structures. The integration of high-tech military systems between two sanctioned powers is unprecedented in modern geopolitics, signaling not just a tactical evolution, but a potential reordering of influence across multiple continents. Personally, it concerns me. Watching how fast coordination is accelerating and how quietly it's happening raises serious questions about how prepared global powers are to respond without escalating conflict further. I kept thinking about the thin line between strategic deterrence and unintended escalation, and how quickly it could be crossed. I'm genuinely curious what you think about this. Do you believe this Russia-Iran alliance will permanently shift the balance of power, or is it a temporary tactical alignment? How soon do you think we'll see operational deployments in the region? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and am interested in your perspective on where this is headed.